next we'll discuss the medical writing part in pharmacovigilance is of narrative writing. Like narrative writing is what that we will discuss. What is narrative writing? So narrative writing is actually like writing the information about the patient who are included in the or who has reported the adverse drug reaction. So a kind of a patient story is written who has reported the adverse drug reactions, or the patients who had suffered from any adverse drug reactions which are life threatening during when they have participated in the clinical trial process, or when they are taking the drug, and in that case if they have suffered from any adverse drug reaction, so that is reported. And the narrative writing reports or the narrative writing paragraphs or the reports, they are submitted, those narratives are submitted along with the case study report. Okay, so medical writing services often include narrative writing. So there are specific jobs profile also you'll see that is of a narrative writer. So for narrative, as a narrative writer also the medical writers are hired. The goal of creating patient narratives is to succinctly summarize any identifiable or particular adverse events that occur in a patient in order to draw a connection between the investigational medicine as the adverse event. Okay, so now the goal of creating the patient narrative is to summarize the information about the particular adverse event which is identified, which occurred in a patient, so that the connection can be set up between that investigational medicine which is under study and the adverse drug reaction or with the adverse event. The clinical study report is presented with these narratives, CSR. So clinical study report, when it is submitted to the regulatory authority, so these all narratives are attached as an appendix with this CSR. Depending on how many adverse events that were and the amount of data that was available for a given patient or occurrence, the length of the narrative could range from 1 to 4 pages. So now the narrative is not a very large document, it is a short document. And what are the cases which are available, in how many patients this adverse event has been reported. So depending on that, the length of a narrative, it ranges from 1 to 4 pages. Depending on the stage of the trial, there may be as many as 1,000 narratives in a CSR. So depending on that, what is the stage, generally at phase 1 trials, many adverse effect occurs, then in comparison to phase 2 and phase 3. So if the CSR is submitted for phase 1 trials, there can be 1,000 narratives which are submitted, and also depends upon the number of participants which are there in the study. Then depending on that, what is the stage of the study, it is a second like phase 2, phase 3 studies. So depending on that, the narratives are submitted. So maximum limit is that the 1,000 narratives, as many as 1,000 narratives can also be there in a CSR. Thus, in order to efficiently control cost, time, and quality, as well as overall project management, the sponsor may decide to outsource the function of narrative writing. So now to control the cost of the company and the time and the quality also, there are specialized medical writers, expert medical writers are hired, and the company can also outsource the project management. They can also outsource the function of narrative writing. So there are various third parties which are there who are working in this field of narrative writing, and they hire the medical writers, and the medical writers, when they are solely involved in writing the narratives, patient narratives, then they are known as narrative writers. Adverse events that occurred in a clinical trial patient or subject are summarized in a patient narrative. So in any patient, if when the adverse events has occurred in the patient or in the subject who has participated in the clinical trial process, then that particular document is known as a patient narrative. It is typically written on the following factors, like in case death occurs, serious adverse events, special interest events, adjudication event, and adverse events which lead to drug trial discontinuation. So in case when we discuss about that, what kind of events, adverse events, or for what patients the patient narratives are written. So first of all, the patient narratives are written for the population in which the adverse event occur. Okay, adverse event occur. So adverse event, it should not be like this, that it is non-serious and the adverse event should not be non-serious. In case if the death, in case if the death occurs of the patient while when they are in the clinical trial process, okay, then if any serious and if any serious event occurs, okay, so in that case also, in any serious adverse event occur which is life threatening or which can lead to a permanent abnormality, so that is also for those also, even any special event, suppose the event which is predicted, and if that event occurs in a patient, so for that the adverse events are, for those the patient narrative, for those patient the patient narratives is written. Then there are certain adjudication events. So these education event are the process is actually, it is a procedure by which the clinical events which are by which the clinical events identified as the potential outputs, and it is assessed. Okay, so now the evaluations are done to, now in this the evaluations are done to manage the, like this is a process in which the clinical trials manage the subjective evaluations and in a particular clinical trial design. Okay, then any adverse event which has led to the clinical study discontinuations, because of those adverse events occurred, and in this, okay, so and due to that adverse event the trial has been discontinued, or the trial has been discontinued, or the trial has been discontinued, or it has been terminated. So for that, for those events also the patient narrative should be written. It should be well organized with a logical flow of information that is clear and simple. In terms of the event for which it is being written, it should provide a medical and scientific context in a concise manner. So the narrative writing, which is, or the patient narrative is written, it contains the patient information, the event they suffered from, okay, when the date when the event occurred, okay, what are the symptoms, like any diagnostic test was done. So all that information is given in the patient narrative. So the information which is shared, it should be well organized, there should be a logical flow of information, and it should be written in a clear and simple language. Okay, and when you're writing about the event, the scientific and the medical context of that event should be provided in a concise or in a relatable manner. Okay, so understood everyone? Is it clear? Then what is logical flow in the patient narrative, and how that logical flow in the patient narrative can be attained? So first, the clinical course of the events with an indication of timing of event corresponding to study drug administration. So now the clinical course of the event, like what is the timing of that indication, and what is the event corresponding to what is the study drug at what related, and the event is related to which study drug. So that information you have to write. Nature, intensity, severity, and outcome of the event. So what is the nature of event? Okay, like it is serious, non-serious, that you have to write. And what is the outcome of that? Maybe it has maybe it leads to death of the patient, or maybe any other maybe it may lead to some permanent abnormality. So whatever the information is related to the nature and intensity and severity, and the information related to outcome of the event, so that should be shared. Then after that, relevant laboratory findings. So what are the relevant laboratory findings related to the, what are the relevant laboratory findings related to the study? Okay, then related to that adverse drug reactions, if any diagnostic tests were performed, so observation or the findings from those diagnostic tests. Then treatment administered for the event. So in case that adverse event occurred, then what is the medical management or the treatment which is provided by the investigator to the patient? Then action taken with respect to the study drug. Then what, at that point only, what is the action taken, like it is reported to the regulatory authority? Then what is the response of the regulatory authority, whether this adverse event is reported in only in a single patient or in many patients? So that in with respect to that, what is the action which is taken, or the clinical trial process has been paused due to this adverse event, so that you have to write. Then post-mortem findings. So in case if the patient dies, so the post-mortem is done, and what are the findings from the post-mortem, so that is reported. Then investigators and sponsors assessment on casualty. So in any case, if the death occurs and if that is related to the drug, so then what is the investigators and sponsors assessment if required. So these two last points, that is post-mortem findings and investigators and sponsors assessment on casualty, so that can be given in the in case if the death of the patient occurs. Then it should also include the patient name, age, sex, race, height, and weight if applicable, the disease being treated if applicable, any previous or concurrent medical drugs, medical history, and any existing or ongoing problem. So apart from this, the patient information is mandatory, so that should include. So the patient narrative should include the patient name, the age of the patient, the gender of the patient, what is to which racism the patient belongs, what is the height and weight of the patient if it is applicable, if it is related to that. Then what is the disease which is being treated, name of the disease. Then any if the patient is having any previous or taking any previous drugs, or if the patient is taking any drug along with the test drug, what is the medical history of the patient. The patient is having any existing or ongoing problem, like the patient is having a problem of diabetes or hepatic or renal impairment, or maybe they are having the problem of hypertension, so like this, or the kidney failure, liver is not working properly. So in any case, if the patient is having any existing or ongoing problem, so all that information about the patient should also be included in the patient narrative. Okay, so now let's discuss about the patient and safety narratives. Each patient who encounters at least one of the qualifying events in accordance with the standards established and decided upon with the regulatory authority has a patient narrative created for them. So now if the patient has encountered, so for what patients, in what condition the patient narrative is written and it is submitted. So the patient narrative is written for the patient who encounter at least one of the qualifying event and according to the standards established. So the standards which are established, like in general, we can understand that the patient narrative is written for the patient in which the problem occurred, in which the issues occurred, which is related to like for example, any life threatening adverse event, any life threatening adverse event, or it can be any it can be any life threatening death or serious adverse event which causes any permanent abnormality. Okay, so that kind of adverse events are reported. Okay, a patient narrative which is included in the which is included into the CSR as an appendix may therefore contain multiple qualifying events for spontaneous reporting. However, our safety narrative is prepared for each event or a group of connected events. Okay, so now the patient narratives, they are included with the clinical study report as an appendix, so that we have already discussed. So therefore it contains the list of various qualifying events in case of several narratives are reported. But in the case of spontaneous reporting, when the adverse events are reported spontaneously, so the safety narrative is prepared, and the safety narrative is an overall report, or it is a cumulative report which contains the information about the connected events, means the relevant events or the same events. So that information is given in the safety narrative. So that is the difference between the patient narrative and safety narrative. Okay, now the therapeutic areas. So depending on the medicine being studied, patient account are written with all therapeutic areas and clinical trial phases for phase 1 to phase 4, molecule and what is its mechanism of action, a crucial phase that necessitates substantial understanding of the pertinent therapeutic field is framing the template of the tales. Okay, so now the therapeutic areas now in this the medicine which is being studied. Okay, so the patient accounts are written for all the therapeutic areas, like in all the phases starting from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. the therapeutic areas and the patient and the written, what are the patients which are included in the studies. So the patient accounts are made, which is known as a patient diary, and this patient diary is made and managed by the clinical data management team. Okay, and this is a crucial phase that necessitates the substantial understanding of the pertinent therapeutic field and framing the templates in which the information can be written. Now, when working on a narrative project, a medical writer should have a solid grasp of the therapeutic area because it will assist them better understand the safety profile of the medication class and its variants. So now, when you are involved in writing a patient narrative, so in that case, you should have knowledge about, so the medical writer, they should have knowledge about all the therapeutic areas, like what is the mechanism, what is its molecule, and what is its mechanism of action, so that the medical writers, if they have already knowledge in those therapeutic areas, or if they belong to a pharmaceutical background, so it is understood that they will have knowledge in the pharmacology. Knowledge is very well required for this, for writing the narrative patient narratives. So because with this information or with this knowledge, they will better understand about the safety of the medication class and about its variants. Okay, then what are the regulatory requirements? So along with the CSR, patient narratives are provided to regulatory bodies. If there are fewer than 10 narratives, that is 6 to 10 narratives, they are either included in section 14.3.3 as an appendix or incorporated as a text in section 12.3.2 of the CSR. Okay, so as per the regulatory requirements, as per the ICH guidelines, the patient narratives are provided to the regulatory authorities and they are submitted along with the clinical study report. If there are few narratives are there, that is up to 6 to 10 patient narratives are there, then they are included in section 14.3.3 of the appendix, or they are incorporated in the as a text in the section 12.3.2 of the clinical study report. The CSR addendum may also include the narratives usually required for legacy studies if the narratives are not submitted earlier. So in case if the narratives are not submitted earlier, then if any addendum is done in the CSR, then it will also include the narratives. Now with that addendum, the narratives can be included if the CSR are not submitted earlier. Then if the regulatory authority recognizes and asks narratives for any event of interest owing to safety concerns, they may also be submitted as the Food and Drug Administration's or another health authority's response document. So now if the regulatory authorities, they recognizes and if they ask the narratives of any event of interest, then then the information related to the safety concerns, they may also submit it to the Food and Drug Administration or any other health authority's response document if in case it is required. Then if there are any safety issues with the trial medicine that require continued investigation by an independent body, patient narratives are also submitted for data safety monitoring board review. So in case if there is any safety issue with the trial medicine, and so then the continuation is done by the independent body, and the patient narratives are also submitted to the data safety monitoring board for the review purpose. Okay, then regulatory review perspective. So while writing a story, a medical writer needs to keep a number of things in mind. It is crucial for medical writer to be aware of their responsibilities and standards while they produce story, because those narratives will be examined by the regulatory authorities. So while writing a story, the medical writer, they need to keep a number of things. The number of things they should remember, that it is crucial for the medical writer to be aware about the responsibilities and the standards while they produce a story, because those narratives will be examined by the regulatory body. So they have to write each and every information accurately, transparently, and it should be presented very well. It should be well formatted and edited document they have to write. Usually, regulatory authorities check the narratives with the following objectives during their review, that is, to identify and closely examine adverse events and serious adverse events that require further monitoring. So now these regulatory authorities, they check the narratives with the following objective, like whether, in the review, they identify and examine the adverse events and the serious adverse events, that whether they require further monitoring or not, to identify and monitor frequency, severity, and seriousness of unexpected adverse events. So if then there is any unexpected adverse event which has occurred, so they will identify that unexpected adverse events, they'll monitor the frequency of those adverse events, what is the frequency, what is the severity, and how serious those adverse events are. So that is also checked and that is also detected. Okay. Understood? Is it clear? Then the other objective of writing these, of the regulatory authority, is to identify the factors which affect and predict for the occurrence of adverse drug reactions, including patient-related factors such as age, gender, ethnicity, race, target illness, abnormalities of renal or hepatic function, comorbid diseases, genetic characteristics such as metabolic status, environment, and drug-related factors such as dose, plasma concentration, duration of exposure, and concomitant medication. So now they will also identify the factors which may also lead to because of that condition also the adverse drug reaction will occur. Maybe it is specific to those patients who are having such kind of factors, who are coming under this particular population, targeted population. Otherwise the adverse reaction will not occur. So these are the factors which should be considered while assessing or investigating the adverse drug reaction. That is the age of the patient, what is the gender of the patient, to which ethnicity, race, or target, what is the target illness which is being treated, if the patient is having abnormalities of renal or hepatic function, if the patient is also suffering from some comorbid diseases, if the person is having any genetic characteristics like their which is related to metabolism, environment, and any drug related factors, which is the dose and plasma concentration, duration of exposure, and if the patient is taking any concomitant medication. Then to evaluate whether the data are suitable for support of the safety analysis. So whether the data is suitable for the support of safety analysis or not, or okay, so data should be complete so that the safety analysis can be performed. To identify the limitations of the drug on the basis of the data. So to identify that what are the limitations of the drug on the basis of the data which is presented. Then to evaluate and analyze drug-drug interaction if applicable. So in case if these adverse events occurred maybe due to any drug-drug interaction. So if there is any drug-drug interaction, so that also needs to be analyzed and evaluated. Then narrative writing. So finalizing the template is the first phase in the process. So the first step in this process is to finalize the template for writing the narrative, patient narrative, which is important in the narrative writing process since it prevents subjectivity. So now there is no template which is used. The narratives can be written on the company letterhead. Writing sample narratives for every convincible criterion is advised. This often involves writing 3 to 5 narratives. However, this may change depending on the overall number of narratives of the study and the team's preferences. So now the sample, so first the narrative samples are written. So 3 to 5 narratives are written generally. So finalized sample narratives must be orderly, succinctly, and pertinent because they will be used to draw additional batches. Okay, so finalized sample narratives, they are orderly, or they are arranged orderly, succinctly, and they are related because they will be used in other additional batches. A consensus on the content or the template of sample narratives among all parties involved in the evaluation process is thus preferred. The collected group of narratives is then presented to the relevant parties before publication. So whatever the parties which are involved, like the sponsor, the funders and all, So in that case, the narratives are first evaluated by them, and then the narratives are presented to them, they are evaluated by them, and before the publication or before the submission of those narratives. All iterations of the narrative document should be kept in the repository or document management system for the audit trial's sake. So now there are pharmacovigilance inspections, and sometimes the trials, audits and inspections are done. So all the feedback related on the narrative document, they should be kept in a database management system. So in case if any audit, any inspection occurs, so that can be represented at that time. Now, what is a narrative writing flow process, which is being followed? So a client approves, first the client approves a project. Okay, all the files containing the relevant data is collected from the client. So then after that, the data related to that narrative, patient narrative, is collected. Then project manager decides the roles of the writers and distribute batches for writing in the team. So now there is a team in which the project manager, they will decide that what will be the role of writers, and he will be responsible for distributing the batches for writing. Then writer 1 will write their batch for their batch, and writer 2 will write for their batch. Okay, and then there will be the quality checking. So then these batches are exchanged and quality checking is done. Then after that, more experienced writer quality analysis the work and make it back to original writer for necessary changes with comments. Then after that, the experienced writer or the senior writer will perform the quality analysis of the writing of the narrative writing reports which are written. And then after that, in case if there are certain changes which are required, so the senior writer will go back to the original writer who has written that that patient narrative with the suggested changes which is necessary. Then quality analyzed batches are finally checked by project manager and uploaded in the e-room for client review and approval. Then after that, the analyzed batches, the quality analyzed batches which are done by the senior writer, they are then analyzed by, they are then finally analyzed or checked by the project manager, and it is uploaded in the e-room or on a same website or somewhere or on a software for the client review, and then after that it is approval. So this is how, when the client gives the project to the client approves the project or gives the project to the third party, how this narrative writing is done. So this is the narrative writing flow process. Then what is the effective way of narrative writing? Kick-off meeting with the stakeholders. So first, the stakeholders, or who are the stakeholders, the client, the project manager, they will conduct a meeting, finalize template with agreement with the clinical team, and finalization of the sample narrative. So now the template in which the narrative will be written, that is finalized with the clinical team. And then the sample narrative is also finalized, like how this sample is written, that so in this particular way only the narrative will be written, so that is then finalized. Then address review comments from the reviewer, conduct comments education on meeting if required. Then after that, when the reviews these narratives are written, so if there is any comments from the reviewer reviewed, so if there is any comments of the reviewer, so that can be discussed in the meeting if it is required. Then draft further batches of narratives based on the final sample narrative. So the final sample narrative which is decided, which is the final sample narrative which is decided, so then after that the further batches of the narratives are then written. Peer and scientific review of all the narratives on an ongoing basis, and then as the narrative writing reports are completed, so at the same time simultaneous the review of the narratives are also done. So it is also an ongoing process. Then comment incorporation and finalization of all the batches and agreement with the reviewers. Then after that, all the reviewers, they will finalize all the batches, and if there are any comment, the changes are to be done, so that is also decided. Then compilation of narratives in one document. Then all the narratives which are written, they are compiled in a one single document, and then after that the document is finalized and then it is submitted along with the for the publication, or it is submitted along with the clinical study report, or it is submitted to the client who has given the project of narrative writing. Okay, understood everyone? Is it clear? Then now what is automation of narratives? How this automation is done in the narratives? So the modernization of the healthcare sector brought about by the technological revolution of the contemporary century has enabled pharmaceutical companies to execute their operations at much lower cost. So now there are various technologies which are developed, and modernization in the healthcare sector and the technologies which are developed. So now in that case, the pharmaceutical companies can also execute their operations at much lower cost. Every pharmaceutical sector is currently implementing automation in narrative writing to ensure quality and consistency across the batch of narratives. So now there are pharmaceutical companies, they are using the narrative, they are also using the automation process in narrative writing so that they can achieve the quality and consistency across all the batches of narratives, because otherwise the consistency is not possible, because the narratives, they are written by different writers. So they'll use their different, they have their writing style which is followed, whether they are written on the same template or the same sample, following the same sample or not. The writing style may differ. The way of presentation may differ. The program that aids in automating narrative creation extracts pertinent data for all identified patients in a specified format or template. Then this automating narrative creation, they extracts the pertinent data, they come up with the pertinent data about the identified patient and write them automatically in a specified format or template. So for research with a big number of narratives, typically more than 150, the tool is particularly used. Okay. So for that process, when there are many narratives which are to be written, so in that cases, generally a tool is used for writing the narratives. So what are the key features? There is a consistency in narratives. High quality narratives are generated with no or minimal error. Then pre-formatted and editable narratives generation, which gives flexibility to modify based on the need. So now the editable narrative generation or pre-formatted narrative generation, both the options are available, so that you can modify the software along as per your needs. Decreased turnaround time for overall narratives. Okay, so for writing the overall narratives, the time which is required is also less. Ability to generate graphs and bar diagrams. So these softwares, they have the feature also to generate the graphs and the bar diagrams also. So maintain audit trail and version control at each stage. So the information is kept, the information is saved in that. So whenever there is an audit trail, and that information is also saved in that particular version. Each stage the saving is done so that no information get lost, or it does not get lost. And after that, whenever there is any audit or inspection occurs, then that information can be presented.